Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Venue Sustainalytics, our brand new benchmarking research project. It's a partnership between Trade Show News Network and IAVM and Honeycomb Strategies. So, the best of the best in the business here to help you out with all of your sustainability metrics information. So we've got a great webinar scheduled for you today. I am Danica Tormohlen, and I am VP of Content for Trade Show News Network. Hopefully you all are subscribed to TSNN and get our regular news. We post daily news, and we have our weekly e-newsletter all about the convention center and trade show industry. So before we get going on this, I'm going to have everybody go around and introduce themselves. I'll start off with Trevor, who probably everybody knows, but that's okay. Trevor.
All right, thanks, Danica. Hello, everyone. Trevor Mitchell, President CEO here at IAVM.
I'll go next. I'm Tim Trefzer, Vice President with Honeycomb Strategies. We are sustainability consultants specializing in the event industry. And I've been a longtime member of IAVM and particularly on the Sustainability Committee, was the chair of the Sustainability Committee about 10 years ago and have been active in it ever since.
And I'm Daniel. I'm the analytics manager here at Honeycomb Strategies. And I was really responsible for a lot of the data analysis with Venue Sustainalytics and kind of putting the dashboard together that we'll go over later on the webinar today.
Great. Thank you all so much. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick run of show so you know what to expect today. So we're going to start out. Trevor's going to kick us off and talk a little bit about why the research is important, why you should participate, what you can get from this information. Tim will do a presentation about Venue Sustainalytics, and then Daniel's going to jump into the dashboard and kind of walk us through how to use it for your own facilities. And I just want everyone to know we do have the Q&A section open. So please drop your questions into there and I will be monitoring it at the end. We will have time for Q&A. I might even take some questions as we're going. So please, this webinar is for you to get the information that you need and ask the questions that you want. So please feel free to do that. The chat is not enabled, but you can do so just in the Q&A. So without further ado, Trevor, tell us why everybody should know about Venue Sustainalytics.
Absolutely. So Venue Sustainalytics actually came out of a conversation that Danica and I were having with another colleague at Honeycomb Strategies at one of the conferences that we were attending. And we were just having this conversation about the state of sustainability as it relates to events and where does it really fall in terms of the venue itself. And through that conversation, we started recognizing that there is a lot of synergies and overlap, but also a lot of missing information when it comes to sustainability. It tends to be one of the topics that is further down the list of priorities from a planner standpoint or from a venue standpoint. And it all kind of varies as you look at venue type to venue type, but also from a different destination to a different destination. And we all recognize that sustainability is here. It's an issue that we need to be addressing. It's something that we can be responsible for. And so it's important for us to be able to have a conversation around sustainability practices, sustainability efforts, as it relates to what's happening inside the venue. That actually led us down this road of trying to figure out, like, well, to be able to have a conversation and to be able to talk about what you're doing and to benchmark what you're doing, you need some sort of tool. And as we at IAVM were looking at more research opportunities within inside the association for the industry, and we started having these conversations, we realized that this was a common question that kept coming up and up again. So within the conversation we all continue to have with Honeycomb Strategies knowledge in this, we really started figuring out, like, what does this look like? And that is where the idea for Venue Sustainalytics actually came from. It derived from that need we saw within the industry for venues to be able to share what they're doing as it relates to all the various areas that we capture data on, which Tim will help go through here in just a little bit, but also be able to talk about where do they fit compared to their peers. And as they're making plans for the future, particularly capital improvement plans, what are things they need to be thinking about to be able to align themselves and advance their project? So it allows to have a centralized conversation around this topic with inside venues that we haven't ever had before. And so this is just our first iteration of being able to give that information forward so venues can be more forthright into their conversations.
Sorry, I was on mute there. So I think it's really important that, this has been a project that we started on last January, and
Yeah.
so much work has gone into this. Honeycomb Strategies has done so much with crunching the numbers here. And, this is really invaluable information. And I want to kind of add on to what Trevor said in terms of, why it's important from our end. We wanted to be involved in it because, show organizers, our readers are asking us questions about sustainability too. And they need to know these benchmarks too. And, when they're having conversations with venues from, the very beginning or all the way up until, their event happens, we want them to be educated on the right terminology, what some of those averages and are. And, Trevor, myself, and Corey were at a MPI recently, a couple weeks ago, and we had a session, and it was so interesting. I think to me was we asked, we talked about the fact that, start having these conversations as early as possible on sustainability, right? That is really critical. So they understand your goals, and they understand, and from the convention center side, you understand what's important to your clients so that you can deliver that for them. And one of the things that we asked them were, how many people are asking this at the RFP stage? And a lot still aren't, and so there is so much more progress to be done. We're just at the beginning stages, and we're so excited to be at the ground level here, taking steps towards making some progress in terms of sustainability, and having us all be on the same page, right? So that we're all speaking the same language and going towards the same goals. So that's what I'll add on from the TSNN side. And so we're really just, helping to try to promote it to our readers so that you guys can have good conversations about these issues going forward.
Right. And
Yeah.
as you were talking, Danica, about that, you're right. Like the conversation we had at MPI was really insightful. We came into it having surveyed the sustainability committee about what are the things that they wish that planners and organizers really were asking, and at what stages. And that really helped frame our conversation because we were really educating them on the venue side. But I think we've got to keep in mind that the consumers and what they're looking for from the experiences they have. And while that was a good example from a convention center side, we're also seeing artists such as Billie Eilish, who is putting their own sort of requirements into the venues in which they will perform in. So when they impact stadiums and arenas, and we think about all the other venues that are within the IAVM's ecosystem, we're looking at, how does this really stack up? And while there's some overlap between how the various venue sectors really navigate this, there are also some interesting uniquenesses of it. And that's one of the things we pulled this tool out. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just one venue type focus, but we really wanted to pull it from all those various venue areas. And that's what made Honeycomb Strategies such a great partner, is because they were also working in all of those venue types as well. So we were able to create this tool that allowed us to capture that and have that common terminology, as you were mentioning, across all the venue types. So we can really look at it in terms of how is this really impacting venues, both holistically as well as based off the type of venue that they are. And I think as we're just rolling it out, we're getting a lot of positive feedback from people who are using it. And it's why it's important. We just collected 2024 data, 2025 data we're getting ready to report now. Our goal, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, but our goal is, like, as we move this forward, we want to get to the point where we're collecting that data as close to the end of the year as possible. So we're getting this report out sooner and making it much more readily accessible and tangible, in more data focus for you in a timely manner than what we were able to do with 2024. the first year takes us a while. We had to build it out, we had to test it out, and the tool really had to evolve to get to somewhere that is beneficial. And I definitely feel that we got there. So now we're really focusing on how do we get more data in there, and how do we get more timely data in there, so we're really having a great picture and be able to have more information for venues in this tool to use it appropriately.
Yeah, we had a question here. So Gail asked, what is MPI? There's so many acronyms in this industry, right? So MPI is Meeting Professionals International. So your clients, the events and meetings that are held in your various buildings. So we were able to, speak to that audience as a united front there, kind of like this, and just talk about sustainability, make them familiar with this project that we're working on. So that would be your customers. And then someone also said that they were having some sound issues with reverb. I'm not having any issues on my end, so not sure if anybody else is having those issues, but so that is where I'll leave it for now on answering questions. I see one that came in, but I'm going to read it real quick, and I'm going to let Tim start his presentation, and we'll start walking through this data.
Great. Okay, I am going to share my screen, and Danica, let me know if you're having any issues seeing it, but looks like it should be shared. So yeah, we're really excited. What I'd like to share in these next few slides with everyone is just some of our high-level findings from our initial report, which was, as Trevor mentioned, for the calendar year 2024. We just shared our initial industry report in April. So our goal is, again, to accelerate the reporting cycle. So just to give everyone a heads up, we are currently collecting 2025 data, and we'll give you some more information on how to provide that later on in this show here. But we're really excited because this initial finding was really our first go at it, and was exciting for us to see just where we are as an industry, and then determine how can we best move forward to be more sustainable operators of event venues. So initially, and Trevor's already mentioned some of this, but I do want to share just some of our initial objectives for why Venue Sustainalytics even came about. I've been working in the sustainability space of the event industry for over 15 years, which is longer than most people. And it's been one of the biggest challenges from the beginning for me has been around data management. Really something that we often hear is, well, how do I compare against my peers? Whether that's a convention center comparing against another convention center, a stadium to a stadium, or even like, buildings that aren't the same categorization, but offer the same services. And so data is really paramount. And as the old saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so that is one of the findings that we took away from this first iteration of Venue Sustainalytics is not every event venue is even tracking their environmental impacts. So that's a really important starting place to really understand how you are performing. But really, our initial objectives with this effort was around creating an industry benchmark around performance. We've also got a really unique, user-friendly, interactive dashboard that Daniel will be sharing with you all shortly, just to show how to, slice and dice the data any which way to benefit you and to understand how you best compare against your peers or against regional buildings, against buildings of similar size. We have a lot of different ways to look at the data. We've also, for those venues that did participate, we've created individual venue reports where all data is anonymized, but they can see how they compare against similar buildings in a straightforward, easy to read format that, is something tangible to take away and understand how, you compare against others. And then ultimately, the idea here is to take this information and create steps and educational resources to help us all improve as an industry. I think it was back in somewhere around the year 2000, the United States EPA announced that the hospitality industry was the second most wasteful industry in the country. And that was really eye-opening, I think, for our industry to understand, wow, we do produce a lot of waste, second only to the construction industry. What can we do to mitigate that? And we do have some positive findings to show that there has been progress made over the last 25 years or so. But, having that understanding and initial data set to really move the needle has been essential in order to show progress. Ultimately, this will become a year-over-year effort. So we hope that each year we'll see some level of progress and improvement. And that's really what's important for us as an industry to show we are making the right steps to reduce our environmental impact and improve our social impact. So just again, this is a free effort. So participation doesn't cost you anything. Again, the data is anonymized, so we're not calling out venues for performance issues. What we're really trying to do is aggregate all this information into an industry-wide report and effort. And you can see here on the right-hand side of this slide, just the different categories of information that we're collecting. We try to make it as streamlined, as simple as possible, so that we're not requiring a lot of time and information from each venue, something that other efforts sometimes do. We just want to be straightforward and as simple to participate as possible. I've already mentioned this a little bit, but again, just two of the key resulting efforts coming out of this is an industry report, and then for those participating venues, getting a specific venue report as well. The industry report is also free to read for anyone that's interested, and you can find that at venuesustainalytics.com. But really what that produces is the meat of what we're trying to get here. Ultimately, what are we seeing as an industry? Where are there gaps, and what do we need to do in order to move forward? We've also included case studies in that industry report. So with the consent of venues, we did highlight some of those venues that are doing really well in different areas of performance so that we can call them out, but also give, really specific examples of what some of your peers are doing to help improve their overall performance.
Hey, Tim, can I ask you a quick question?
Please do, yeah.
Okay, so I heard, and I know from our findings that really it's about tracking and measuring. The ones that do it are the ones that are further along, right, in their journey in terms of sustainability. What did you say? If you don't track, whatever is measured is, what was that saying? I love that.
Yes. If you don't manage it, or if you don't measure it, how can you manage it?
Yeah, exactly. So a key takeaway for me is on tracking that for everybody in the industry, right? And so I wanted to ask you, what are some tips that you have on tracking this data to make it easy and then also fill out like this, put your information and data in here? What is, a time saving tip that you might have on that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be cumbersome, right, to track all this information. But already most of your venues are tracking, your economic impact, your sales data, your attendance information. This is just another few data points that we're asking to track. You're typically getting, for instance, your waste performance or your waste hauling data from your waste hauler, consolidating that, putting it into either a dashboard, that you can use yourself as a venue. There's some free tools out there as well, but really just capturing and consolidating the information into a central point is key. And I've got a few specific examples of why that's important in the coming slides, but we did find that not every venue tracks this information. And Again, it's really important, and it's evident that if you don't track all this information, you're missing out on dollars and cents too, because ultimately what tracking this information should lead to is more building efficiency and operational efficiency, which could and should lead to cost savings.
Those are great points. And I would also, I mean, I would think from a venue standpoint too, you can use all of this information to put together annual reports for your own teams and for your own like the city itself or whoever owns your building. These are data points that you're hopefully, if you're not tracking, this is a great reason to track it. And then once you have all of that, you can use it for other reports to prove your value, to show year over year savings or efficiencies, like you mentioned. So, just wanted to help give our audience some pointers here too.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. We're also seeing, as you all mentioned, meeting planners are asking for this information in some cases, and in order to provide it, you've got to collect it in the first place. So it is becoming something more common that we're seeing from individual events, but just as a whole, for each venue, I think you should be tracking this information. And you've got to start somewhere, and that would be the first place to start.
Yeah. Trade show organizers are definitely asking for it, but I would say even more so on the corporate side too. So some of the big, Fortune 1000 companies, if they're holding an event in your building, they're going to be asking for those data points. It may be less current with the current administration right now, but I wouldn't foresee that as a long-term thing. So it would be good to get started now if you're not already doing it. Okay, I'll give it back to you, Tim.
Okay. And just one additional point on that. Yeah, we're seeing at Honeycomb Strategies, those corporate clients are still asking for it. So it's not gone away from their perspective as well. So it is important for venues to make this a priority. So just again, to highlight the dashboard, which is also free and publicly available on venuesustainalytics.com. Daniel will give you a quick tutorial on how to use it momentarily. But just again, to show how the dashboard is also a beneficial tool as part of this overall effort. It really allows customization. It allows you to, again, slice and dice the data that you want to see to really meet the needs of your particular venue. So you can look at the data regionally. You can look at it by square footage or attendance numbers or number of events hosted. We know that there's no real good way to normalize the data of these event venues because every venue is different and every event that you host at your venue is different. So this is the best way for us to find a way to normalize the data. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. So that's what's, one of the really nice benefits of having this interactive tool as part of Venue Sustainalytics as well. So more to come on the dashboard, but just wanted to highlight some of those key categories that we're tracking. Okay, so highlights from our initial report. Again, this is all based on 2024 data. We're currently collecting 2025 data with the expectation that our report will be completed before the end of this year. But overall, we had a good number of participants in the initial year. We had 53 venues participate with a really good smattering of regionality as well represented. So as you can see here on the left, a lot of venues across the globe in different regions represented. As far as venue types go, we had over 50% of the participating venues were convention centers or exhibit halls, with a good number of arenas, performing arts centers, theaters, stadiums, and ballparks also participating. But ultimately, our goal is to get more and more venues in here because the more data that we can capture, the better information we can glean from it. So a good starting point for the first year, but we definitely want to see these numbers increase this year. So some highlights. let's look at energy first. This is probably one of the areas that most venues start with because there's a immediate ROI for the most part. What we've collected here and what's represented on this slide is the median total energy use by venue category, along with the median total by events hosted, and then median by square footage. And this is important, and I want to call out why. So if you look at stadiums and ballparks, for instance, you'll see that the median total energy use for stadiums and ballparks is by far the highest of any of these four venue types, right? Over 32 million kilowatt hours is the median for a stadium and ballpark. But we know that that's not the only number that you can look at. So let's look at it differently and break it down by square footage. And when you look at the median energy use by square footage, it's actually the lowest in stadiums and ballparks because of their size, right? So actually taking that into account, theaters, amphitheaters, and performing arts centers have the highest total median energy use by square footage of any of these venue types. So really interesting, again, why normalizing the data is so important, because you can't just take that one factor into account. And when looking at it by square footage, or even at as number of events hosted, these numbers vary pretty significantly. Additionally, some more energy facts that we found. Of the 48 venues that shared their energy data with us, there was over 809 million kilowatts of energy used, which is the equivalent of powering 78,000 US households for a year. So that's just 48 of our venues for 1 year, enough to power that many homes. That just goes to show how impactful these venues are, how much energy can be used in some of these venues. And ultimately, we do have a major impact and have an opportunity to really reduce those numbers if taken into account and really focused on. We also found that of the venues participating, 13% have renewable energy on site. And of those, 6 out of the 7 were convention centers. Don't know why, but most of those with renewable energy come from convention centers. So just another interesting fact, and maybe an opportunity for other venue types to begin focusing on renewable energy as well. Could just be due to convention centers having more roof space or parking available. But ultimately, that was one of the unique findings that came out of this report as well. And Danica, chime in if you've got any other questions that come up from the audience or from yourself. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask. I'll pop in with one question. When you talked about 13% of venues have renewable energy on site, is that like, do you have any context for that? Like in terms of other, other buildings, venues, around the globe where that compares at all?
I don't know. That's a good question, though. I do think ultimately, though, the reason a lot of venues have renewable energy on site could be due to, infrastructure, could be due to local power purchase agreements and benefits from the local utility provider. So it's not feasible for all venues to have renewable energy. We know that. But in some cases, this energy can go to powering the building itself, which could have a nice ROI for the building operators. So ultimately, it's not really something we can compare to other industries at the moment, but I think because we generally have, as part of the venue industry, space for solar, for instance, this could be a number that we focus on increasing, and it really does depend on the local utility arrangements. I know I'm based in Atlanta, and the Georgia World Congress Center, which is The convention center in Atlanta has solar around its campus, but that power goes directly into the grid. So they're not able to use it directly at their buildings, just due to the local regulations with the power providers. But other venues, particularly in California, where I am currently, many do, and they are able to take advantage of that power directly as part of their operations. So I know there are some uniquenesses to it, but ultimately, we hope to see that number increase.
Great. I have two questions in our Q&A. One I'm going to save for when Daniel gets on because it's about the dashboard. But this one I think that you would be best to answer. So Ronnie Gomez is asking, from an environmental design perspective, I'm interested in learning how waste management professionals translate operational requirements into physical layouts. When determining waste station locations, what design standards, service radius targets, waste generation formulas, or behavioral data do you use to balance user convenience, collection efficiency, sustainability goals, and operational costs? Big question, but maybe you could just point him in a little bit of the right direction here.
Yeah, well, that's a great tee up into our next section, which is on waste here.
Yeah.
So good timing. Let me cover these next two slides, and then I'll try to answer Ronnie's question, which some of the answers may come from the slides, but I think it requires additional explanation. So similar to energy, waste, we looked at a number of different ways. Here we've broken the total amount of waste per venue type, as well as we did in the previous slide. For energy, you'll see again, stadiums and ballparks produce the highest median total waste per venue type. But again, if you look at it a different way, such as per attendee, that number, the higher median goes to the convention centers. I'll talk about theaters, amphitheaters, and performing arts centers on the next slide. But again, just demonstrates the importance of looking at the data a number of different ways. So the theaters, performing arts centers, and amphitheaters that participated in this initial Venue Sustainalytics report did not track their waste streams, and none of them did. So there's no explanation for that. Some of the theories that we came up with might be due to their smaller nature. So they don't have room perhaps on their loading docks to separate materials. Also just different dumpsters, compactors. Some are not able to be weighed. So while these venues are all producing waste, they may not be able to get the actual weight data because of the smaller nature of the containers that are used. It's another theory. We don't know. We just hope that we'll see actual data come through in the next report. But we did find that interesting. We also found it interesting that of those venues that have a sustainability certification, like LEED or the ISO 2012-1 certification for sustainable events, or the Event Industry Council's sustainable event standards, 86% of those with certifications are tracking their waste. So we did find that correlation to determine that having a certification does help to prioritize collecting this type of data as part of venue operators go. All but 3 venues reported recycling cardboard, which, as many of you will recognize, cardboard's probably one of the most ubiquitous disposable materials coming into and leaving event venues on a regular basis. 27 venues reported their annual waste diversion rate with us, and that diversion rate was 40% for 2024, which 40%, frankly, surprised me. That's higher than I would have expected. It's higher than the national average for household recycling rates. So that's good. I mean, it demonstrates that some of these venues, especially those that participated in Venue Sustainalytics, are doing a fairly good job with managing their different waste streams. Now, going back to Ronnie's questions, there's a lot of different ways to look at capturing and diverting waste. Every venue type is different too, and I don't want to sound like it's easier for some venues, but I will say that for particularly for stadiums, ballparks, and arenas, where for most events you're limited as an attendee in what you can bring into that facility, it does make it somewhat easier to control what's coming into the building and how it leaves the building. Whereas convention centers, in particular, it's almost like an anything goes situation where most people can bring in whatever they want, and most people can dispose of whatever they want in that building, which makes it really difficult to manage that those different waste streams. So we've seen, particularly at sporting venues like stadiums, ballparks, and arenas, dedicated waste sorting spaces because they know for the most part what materials to expect and how those materials can be diverted on the back end. There's some really good examples. We've called out some in our report as well that are doing a really nice job sorting. It does require labor though, and that labor, it does have a cost to it. So there are some balances that need to be taken into effect. But for other venues like a convention center, it does make it much more difficult. And there are some that have concerted efforts to minimize certain materials coming into the building and then really incentivizing events to divert materials as best as possible by, charging additional fees for having certain materials, raising the rates for landfill bound materials so that it incentivizes them to divert through either composting, recycling, or donations. But there are some different strategies being put into place. And Ronnie, for the newer venues, I know there is more of a concerted effort on creating these zero waste type facilities that build in waste sorting spaces back of house to help facilitate waste diversion from those venues. So I'm hoping I'm answering those questions from him properly, but happy to elaborate if needed.
Thanks, Tim. That was super helpful. And I'm sure, Ronnie, that Tim would be available to answer a question for you offline after as well, if you want to go into it any further. So I took away from that. I mean, I know it is super hard to control what goes into convention centers. And particularly, I walked a show recently. I did a site visit at the end of a show that was just moving out. And I was dumbfounded of how much stuff was left behind just on the floor in the convention center. It was terrible. I was like, all the food and drinks and everything that people don't even throw away. It was just, like shocking. I'm sure it's probably for the people on this call, it's not shocking, but I was mortified that people don't take out their own trash or recycle it and put it in the correct bins. So that's my 2 cents. But I love what you said about raising rates, some strategies for dealing with that, like raising rates for that won't necessarily work at a convention center like that. But incentivizing people and or raising some rates for landfill waste is, carrot or stick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's very eye-opening to see an event moving out and to see just how much is left behind. But yeah, we are seeing some of those strategies working, and so definitely would encourage you to consider whatever makes the most sense for your venue, or ultimately just having these conversations with your event clients early and often. If you're trying to, communicate to them that this is a priority for your venue. Hopefully they'll prioritize it as well. And they're the ones that have that communication thread with the exhibitors, with the general services contractors, with the attendees, all these different stakeholder groups play a role. And that's also what makes part of this industry so challenging, is there's so many different players coming to the table that we've all got to be on the same page and, going from the same playbook. And that's one of the bigger challenges that we've identified. So make sure to have these conversations frequently and at the beginning of planning stages for an event to make sure that they're, prioritized.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go to water, and again, similarly, you will see how we've broken out the water data for venue types based on total or median total water usage, square footage, and number of attendees or visitors. Not surprisingly, as we saw with energy and water, stadiums and ballparks also have the highest median total water usage. But when looking at it per square foot, that number is highest in arenas and civic centers. And then looking at it per attendee or visitor, that number is highest with convention centers. So interesting again to see how that shakes out per different venue usage. And then I do want to call out that we did have some takeaways from how we collected water data in this initial year, and we'll likely be making some tweaks to it moving forward. But I did, and you'd see if you were looking at the dashboard right now, that water use consumption in the southeast of the United States was significantly higher than in other areas that we collected, other regions. And we did have one particular venue self-report that they had a major water leakage in 2024 that likely contributed to that number being so high. So we're expecting and hoping to see that number come down here for 2025. But again, that goes to show if you're not tracking your water usage, that leak may not have been noticed by that particular venue if they weren't tracking it. And so, again, just demonstrates the importance of capturing this data and really looking at it regularly to see if there are any anomalies or any trends or anything that needs to be addressed with your overall consumption. I'm going to wrap up here our next couple of slides really quickly to give Daniel time to share the dashboard, but just a few other high-level findings that we took away. 74% of those venues participating had a sustainability webpage on their website. Again, communication is so key to making sure that these conversations are happening. So starting with a webpage is really important. If you're not doing that already, we encourage you just to start a web page and put what your existing practices are on there so that meeting planners and attendees are aware of what to expect when they come to your building. And then 45% of those participating venues had a sustainability certification. And of those certifications, LEED for existing buildings was the highest individual certification that we found. We also found that green teams, having an on-site green team at venues demonstrates improved performance as well. So if your building has not had a green team or a dedicated sustainability professional on staff, I encourage you to consider one or both of those. Those with green teams were more likely to have sustainability reporting available at their venue. They were also more likely to have a sustainability certification at their venue as well. And lastly, just our contact information if anyone needs it. My email address is listed here second from the bottom if anyone has any particular questions you'd like to ask me. But also just want to encourage everyone to check out venuesustainalytics.com. Go ahead and download for free the industry report. It's got a lot more findings than what I presented to you today. But it also allows you to input your data for 2025, which again, we're collecting that currently through the end of August. So please share. Again, it's free, your data is anonymized, and you get an individual report coming out of it as well to really help understand where your building performs compared to your peers.
Thank you so much, Tim. And hopefully, maybe Ronnie is going to send us his email to connect with you offline, or he got off of that slide, your information, your contact information. So thanks for sharing that with everyone. So we'll kick it over to Daniel, we are at 1:45, so we have 15 minutes left, everyone. We're going to run through the dashboard. And if anybody has any questions along the way, I'm going to start off by Nick has a question. Does the dashboard also allow for comparing to venues based on square footage range, being that venues of similar types might differ dramatically in size? And I think we have a good answer for him.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. We definitely do have a good answer. Cool. So first, I'm going to demonstrate how to actually get to the dashboard. So I'm here on the Venue Sustainalytics website. So a lot of good information, resources on here. Like Tim mentioned, this is where we can get the entry report. This is how you can go to enter in data. But kind of in this top menu bar, we have this dashboard button. This will take us directly to our dashboard. And this is free to access to anyone. You don't have to be a venue manager. You don't have to have participated in 2024. Anybody can come and access this dashboard kind of free of use. Our landing page here is just our participants page. So just a map of all our participants that participated in 2024, as well as just some demographic information that Tim went over. So kind of that percentage breakdown by venue and by region. Again, just some high level demographic information on this first page. And in these next tabs, we'll kind of like start getting into the actual data themselves. So kind of moving over into energy. So Danica, to that question, so this top here, this is kind of like all the different filter options that we have. So if we want to filter out by certain regions, by certain venue types, or we could kind of filter out by these different square footage categories. So we kind of broken out into 4 different buckets. So we can kind of filter by a multiple of these if we want to see convention centers in a certain square footage bracket. Kind of like all the charts that I'll get down to below, we'll kind of like adjust with those filters. So we kind of just like get like that comparison to as close to like size or peer venues that we want. And then kind of like our last filter here is just kind of like different buckets for kind of annual number of events throughout the year. So a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data. It doesn't just have to be by similar venue types. Again, Tim mentioned earlier, some venues may be different venue types, but kind of like operate in similar ways.
So the answer, Nick, is yes. You are able to slice and dice the data by square footage, as you can see here. So thanks for walking us through this, Daniel. It's really interesting. This dashboard is amazing to everybody here. So if you haven't used it before, this is a really great tutorial on how to really take this information and use it to compare your venue to other venues. I have a couple questions after, but I'm going to let you run through this, Daniel, and show us how to use it.
Yeah, I'll just demonstrate a couple more capabilities, kind of features that we have on the dashboard. So kind of like sticking in energy, kind of like this first section, just demonstrating how different venues are tracking various different energy sources. So kind of yellow indicating that they are currently tracking that energy source, green that they are using it but not currently tracking it, and then gray just like that, it's not applicable to that venue. And then just some pie charts on the right here with renewable energy usage. Before I scroll down, we'll kind of like get into like the numbers itself that Tim highlighted on his presentation. But I do want to highlight this like green category, this used but not tracked. So kind of like because of venues reporting that they are using these but not tracking them, we decided in the charts below that we were going to separate out data by energy specific rather than combining into a total energy usage. We didn't want to kind of arbitrarily inflate venues who were tracking and reporting all their energy compared to venues who were maybe using it but not tracking it. Those venues that were reporting on it would kind of like seem higher of like a total energy consumption numbers compared to those other venues who were still using that but not necessarily reporting on it. So we did separate it out by energy specific sources, and we'll kind of showcase that right now. So kind of scrolling down again, so we can kind of like tab through all the different energy sources that we have here. And this is where we really start getting into the data. So kind of like on electricity, This top left chart here is just a box plot of annual electricity consumption by venue type. And then this right is just a table kind of displaying like the same information that is on this box plot, just like in a table, easy to compare really quick side by side those numbers between venue types, kind of like an easier Excel-like chart, easier to understand. But for this box plot, we decided to go with box plot just to like really easily like identify where those outliers live, kind of like illustrated by these like tails on these box plots, as well as just like where like the meat of the data, as well as where the meat of the data is kind of like in the center of these like box squares. And kind of like hovering over those, we can kind of see like what that high reported number was, what that low reported number was, that Q1 and Q3 percentages, as well as that median. And again, this table kind of like showcases that same information, just in a kind of cleaner table, easier to export if you want to export it yourself. And I will also say that we included the average and median values on this table. So again, you'll notice in our reporting, and like that Tim just went through, we really utilize median values as much as possible. Kind of just like what these box plots showed us was that there were outliers, and we kind of wanted to like reduce the influence of those outliers on our data set. So convention centers is like a great example here. Obviously, there's like a very clear high outlier here, which is kind of pushing that average higher, where this median value is like much more indicative of like the middle of our data set that is helps normalize data as best we can. And then lastly, just like another feature of these tables is kind of just like then drilling down into regionality. So kind of clicking on a certain venue type. So I'll just click onto convention centers. We kind of like now get a breakdown of convention centers by region. So kind of like this like far right column is kind of like those like aggregated results of all convention centers. And then a regional breakdown, kind of like all those metrics with like some heat map color options, again, of that median value compared to kind of like the venue convention center average. So that's total electricity. Kind of scrolling down, we then get into like energy or electricity intensity metrics. So electricity per square foot, electricity per number of events, electricity per number of attendees, kind of like all with that regionality drill down if we want to. And if we are applying filters at the very top for certain square footage buckets or different number of event buckets, those would be reflected in these charts as well. So kind of like a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data to kind of like get the comparison that you're really after. And yeah, that can be used by venue operators, venue managers for any sort of like benchmark reporting to compare their venue to like-size venues. It can be used by event planners. Sometimes when they're hosting events at these venues, they're not always able to get energy usage from these venues. So this at least helps them to be able to provide some sort of estimate. So like if they know like the size of their show and like maybe like the region where it was at, they can kind of get like electricity per square foot and kind of like do those proper calculations too. It's not going to be exact, but at least it'll provide some sort of estimation that they can take away from that rather than not being able to like collect any sort of sustainability data for their event. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all the different tabs on this, but they kind of like all behave the same way. So kind of waste, kind of like the same filters up top, some different percentage categories of how venues are collecting all the different various waste streams that we asked about in our survey. And then the same sort of box plot table charts that we were seeing on electricity. We have diversion rate, kind of like total waste generated, waste per square foot, waste per number of events, waste per attendee, visitors. Again, this can be used by event planners, again, if they don't receive waste data. If they know how many attendees came through their event, we can at least like get some sort of estimation so we're not walking away with anything. Water behaves very similarly. To Tim's point, in this first iteration, we had a lot of different like water sources. So whether it was like indoor versus outdoor, potable versus reclaimed. But again, due to like we got feedback from venues that it was like hard to parse out or they don't necessarily track data to this granularity. So in 2025, we did clean up that question, just trying to get more accurate information as best we can. But same sort of operation use. So total water use, water per square foot, water per attendees, visitors.
Daniel, I have a question that's relevant right here. Are there any details about reclaimed water systems, types or sizes? Any details? Where is that right here?
We don't have, I mean, as best we can, it's just like this like outdoor reclaimed water tracking versus indoor reclaimed water tracking. And we found that like a lot of like respondents to this question, like they were really just responding like, yeah, we track water consumption, and we track potable versus reclaimed, but we can't separate it out by indoor versus outdoor, or kind of like vice versa, that like we're able to track kind of like indoor water use versus like outdoor irrigation use, but they're not able to separate out potable versus reclaimed. But that's kind of like as granular as detail as we kind of got into reclaimed water usage.
Great. Wonderful. I got one more question here. Maybe I could ask before, since it's 55. How do venues enter their utility data into this platform? Is it manually entered or uploaded via PDF version of bills? That might
Yeah,
even be a Tim question, but I'm sure you can answer it too.
I can answer that. I'm gonna hold. I'm gonna wrap up
Okay,
at
sounds
the end
good.
of that, and we'll kind of like get into all those kind of like next step questions.
Great.
Yeah, so really quick wrapping up operations. Again, this is just kind of like those charts that Tim went through, kind of just like a breakdown of different certifications that venues had in 2024. Some yes, no pie charts of different policies they would have that Tim shared, different engagement and communication practices that these venues have. So whether they have green teams, sustainability positions, things like that, as well as some accessibility breakouts or accessibility features at these venues. And then quick little carbon tab. We didn't touch on carbon too much. We really just asked about whether these venues were tracking various different carbon emission categories. So those results are displayed here. And then lastly, just an FAQs page. So again, just like a little a video tutorial. If anyone's new to the dashboard, they weren't able to like go through like this tutorial basically that I'm going through right now. They can kind of access a tutorial right now of how to play around with the different capabilities and features of the dashboard. A link of how to join the Momentum Submit data for 2025, and then kind of like that same contact information. So that's kind of the dashboard. And then do want to leave time for the Q&A. But to your first point, Danica, how to submit data for 2025. So again, the Venue Sustainalytics website, that has like a link directly to, it is a Microsoft form right now. So you are kind of like entering in data manually. There's like a PDF download you can do from that form. So you can kind of like collect all your responses and aggregate it all and then go back in and like submit it. So you're not just constantly having to spend like 30 minutes trying to like track down data. But so the actual submission's easier. But no, we're not asking people to kind of like submit utility invoices for like for all 12 months for the calendar year.
Great. That was helpful. I saw when I was looking at that dashboard, the second to the last one, when you were on the operations part of it, I thought that that would be really great for a lot of people on this call, maybe to be for budgeting, to be able to compare your venue to other venues and be able to say, hey, the most people, 50% of or 80% are doing this, we should be doing this type of thing. So really helpful information there on the ops tab in particular. I saw, and you can really nerd out on this data, right? Like get down, get really nitty gritty into some stuff if you want to. So I'm sure there's some nerds that want to do that on here. So I mean, it really is amazing how you can slice and dice the data. So I love that. There was one question up here. I think that some people have been answering questions as we go. Thank you very much from our panel here. Maybe, I'm not sure who can answer this. Talking about, I'm a member of the Solar Washington and planning solar summit coming up. Interested in the 13% of venues generating renewable energy. We kind of touched on that a little bit. But how can solar companies or consultants best work with venues? Maybe that's a Trevor question, to get more solar installed around the country on venues. Yeah, that would be the ideal situation. But
Well, I don't know specifically about solar in general. I think for us, like that, one of the things that this helps us do as an association is find other solution providers out there to help connect them, to help solve these kinds of questions and issues that venues are facing. And so while I don't have any off the top of my head, I think this is what we're actually like. This is some of the data that helps us be better for our members in the industry as a whole.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we answered everybody's questions on here, which is amazing. And we were able to cover all of our information today. So I know some of it went kind of quickly, but it's a good first step. And thank you all for participating and being here and caring about our project and also sustainability in general. And I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and spending their time today, an hour of their time today, to present this to you all that are listening. So thanks so much. And it is 2:00, 1 hour. So we will sign out.